This case started on a freezing Saturday night in December 1991 in Austin, Texas. Two 17-year-old girls named Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Hobison were co-workers at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurts tour at the North Cross Mall. It was almost 11 o'clock at night and their shift was about to end. A little bit after 10 o'clock, Jennifer's sister, 15-year-old Sarah Hobison, and her friend 13-year-old Amy Ayers were hanging around the mall. They were waiting for the girls' shift to end since the four of them were going to a slumber party together that night. To avoid being late to the party, Sarah and Amy entered the store to assist Eliza and Jennifer close up in time. It was already 12 o'clock and Officer Troy Gay of the Austin Police Department was on patrol that evening when he saw smoke coming from the strip mall. Firefighters quickly arrived on the scene after the officer called in. They soon discovered a horrifying scene while putting out the fire. In the store, the lifeless bodies of Jennifer, Sarah, Amy, and Eliza were strewn across the floor. It was obvious that they had been ruthlessly murdered. The teenagers were all bound and gagged in their own clothes while completely naked. Jennifer, Sarah, and Eliza were found in the rear of the back room, huddled into one corner, while Amy's body was recovered in the middle of the back room. Sarah and Eliza were piled on top of one another, and Jennifer was lying nearby. The girls' legs were wide open, and one of them had an ice cream scoop tucked in between it. The killer or killers had gathered napkins and other combustible materials from about the shop, doused the victims with lighter fluid, and then set the place on fire before escaping, leaving their bodies almost completely burned beyond recognition. Their autopsy results revealed that they had all been shot execution style in the back of the heads. Additionally, 2 or more of the girls had experienced sexual assault. Authorities also disclosed to the media that 2 firearms had been used in the killings, raising the possibility of at least 2 killers. Police investigators and the management of the yogurt shop determined that $540 also was taken from the shop. It was unclear if the girls had been targeted particularly because someone knew they would be alone inside the store that night or if the intended purpose had been a robbery and the culpites had then recognized a chance to take advantage of them. Lead Detective John Jones and his partner Mike Huckabee launched an immediate investigation into the case. There were several problems with the investigation right away. First of all, the firefighters who responded to the crime scene did their jobs, but ultimately washed away important forensic evidence in the process. Furthermore, Austin had only one fingerprint unit at the beginning of the 1990s, which lacked forensic expertise. Additionally, there was only one homicide investigator working the shift the night of the murders due to the limited number of the city's homicide squad. Despite the police department's shortcomings, Detectives Jones and Huckabee had quite a large number of suspects. The police station's phones were ringing nonstop as tips poured in. When faced with 342 suspects and scores of fake confessions, the investigators became overwhelmed. The investigators started by looking into possible local serial killers due to the graphic nature of the crime and the staging of the teenagers' bodies. This led them to Kenneth Allen McDuff. A quick note before we continue. As you know, on Uncover Eyes, we release new videos every other day. Many of you have reached out expressing a desire for daily content, so we've launched a new channel, also focused on real-life crime stories, called Secret Crime Mysteries. On the days we don't post videos on Uncover Eyes, we'll be uploading them on Secret Crime Mysteries. This means if you're looking for daily doses of astonishing real-life crime cases, don't hesitate to subscribe. Without further ado, let's dive into today's case. Kenneth Allen McDuff was a Texas serial killer who is thought to have committed at least 14 murders. On August 6, 1966, he was found guilty of killing 3 teenagers named Robert Brand, Mark Dunman, and Edna Louise Sullivan. These killings were known as the broomstick murders because Edna's neck was broken like a broomstick after she had been sexually abused numerous times. For his crimes, Kenneth Allen McDuff was given a death sentence, but in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to end the death penalty in a 5-4 ruling, and his sentence was altered to life in prison with the chance of parole. He was granted parole in 1989 as a result of prison overpopulation. It is however believed that Kenneth Allen McDuff further committed numerous killings upon his parole, including the 1992 slaying of Melissa and Northrop, a 22-year-old Texan. After many years of eluding authorities, Macduff was ultimately apprehended and put on death row. On November 17, 1998, the day before he was put to death, he admitted to killing the 14 eggers at the yogurt store. He was foolish if he believed that making this last-minute confession would save his life. That day, as planned, he was put to death. Detectives looked into Macduff's confession but disregarded him when fingerprints and hair taken from the yogurt store could not be used to identify him as the killer. Days after the brutal killing of the girls, investigators received a tip to look into a teenager named Maris Pius. Maris Pius was a 16-year-old boy who was spotted with a gun that night at the North Cross Mall, where Sarah and Amy were hanging out before going to the yogurt store. The weapon was a handgun with a .22 caliber, the same caliber as one of the weapons used to kill the girls. However, nothing came out from the lead when Detectives Jones and Huckabee questioned Pierce along with his 3 friends who accompanied him to the mall. Ballistics analysis of Marie Spears' gun revealed that it did not match the murder weapon. Additionally, just like with Macduff, none of the 4 suspects were identified by the fingerprints and hair samples taken from the crime site. The detectives eventually moved on from this. The case was given to new detectives after years went by without any arrests. Then, in 1999, Forrest Welborn, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Marie Spears, for earlier suspects now in their 20s, were apprehended for the killings at the yogurt store. These were the same suspects who had been questioned 8 days prior to the girls' deaths and had been let go due to a lack of evidence. Michael Scott, one of the suspects, admitted to the murders. He wasn't alone, though. Robert Springsteen also admitted to killing the girls and raping one of them. The police were sure they had their killers after these confessions. According to the theory, the 4 boys had intended to rob the yogurt shop. Forrest Welborn waited outside and kept watch as Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Marie Spears entered the store. The theft went horribly wrong, though, and all of the females were killed. The allegations against Welborn were dropped after the authorities made 2 attempts to indict him for the killings, but were unable to do so due to a lack of evidence connecting him to the crime. Charges against Marie Spears were also dropped due to a lack of evidence, which was extremely difficult for the police and the families of the victims to accept, because he was thought to be the mastermind behind the crime and the subsequent killings. Both Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were found guilty of capital murder after separate trials for the yogurt store killings. The state of Texas had approved a new death penalty statute, making it feasible for Robert Springsteen to receive the death penalty even after the Supreme Court decision in 1972. But Michael Scott received a 99-year jail sentence. However, shortly after their trials, grave questions were presented that showed Springsteen and Scott might not have been guilty. In the beginning, there was no tangible proof connecting any of them to the crime. Both men added that their confessions had been forced upon them, and there was some proof to support their assertions. One of the detectives working on the case was reassigned after it was claimed that he had forced confessions in an unrelated case. Additionally, a picture of another Austin police officer aiming a gun at Scott's head during questioning surfaced. Both convictions were overturned by the courts after they determined that they had violated Springsteen and Scott's Sixth Amendment right to confront their accuser. This came 15 years after the yogurt shop killings were perpetrated. During the trial, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen's confessions were used against each other, but their attorneys were never permitted to cross-examine the accuser. It was determined that their constitutional rights had been violated as a result. Later, in 2008, DNA testing on the evidence gathered from the crime scene revealed that neither Scott nor Springsteen's DNA, nor that of any other persons accused of the crime, matched the results. According to then Travis County District Attorney Rosemary Lemberg, the yogurt store murder was committed by Scott and Springsteen, but the men would not be charged again until the unknown man linked to the DNA evidence at the crime scene was located. The majority of law enforcement officials continue to believe that the original 4 suspects were the culprits, and that the DNA evidence implicating a 5th suspect was a fabrication. The 5th suspect argument, according to Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen's defense attorneys, is absurd, and they emphasize that no one ever brought up a 5th suspect before the inconvenient DNA results came in. According to some attorneys, investigators, family members, and armchair detectives who have studied this case, the killers of the teenagers may have been 2 unnamed customers who were at the yogurt store right before it closed. although 52 customers who had come into the store on the day of the murders were reportedly questioned by the police. 2 individuals who witnesses said were present at closing time have never been located. 3 customers left the store shortly before it closed and on their way out. They reportedly saw 2 males seated in a booth, and they didn't appear to be planning to leave anytime soon. Perhaps the men ordered a soft drink. When Jennifer and her coworker decided to close the store, at least one of the customers witnessed her lock the front door and post a closed sign to prevent any additional customers from coming in. After all the other customers had left, only the 2 men in the booth remained. Witnesses gave the following descriptions of the persons of interest. One is around 5 foot 6 inches tall and has lighter hair, maybe like a dirty blonde. He seemed in his late 20s through early 30s. The second man is noted as being larger. Both were dressed in larger jackets, one of which was green, an army fatigue kind of looking jacket, the other had a black jacket. Neither of these males has been named as of yet. In the end, it is debatable if robbery was really the true motivation in this instance. It is difficult to believe that these killings were just the outcome of a robbery gone wrong given the meager sum of money seized and the high level of violence. The likelihood that the murder was committed with sexual motivation and that the murderers only grabbed the money as an afterthought is substantially higher. It's possible that one of the girls knew the murderers. Or it's possible that Sarah and Amy were followed from the mall to the yogurt store. Linking the DNA evidence discovered at the scene to the 2 male customers who were observed by witnesses lingering in the yogurt shop after closure could hold the key to solving this case. The 1991 murders at the yogurt business altered the city of Austin irrevocably. The murders were referred to by the then mayor as the crime where Austin lost its innocence. Residents of Austin began to doubt the safety of their community after the brutal and untimely deaths of 4 young girls who still had their entire lives ahead of them. The I Can't Believe It's Yogurt store was converted into a nail salon, but a plaque honoring Jennifer Hobson, Sarah Hobson, Amy Ayers, and Eliza Thomas still stands in the parking lot beneath a large oak tree, serving as a reminder to anybody passing by that the murder case is yet to be solved and that justice is yet to be served. Alex Murdaugh attempted to follow in his family's footsteps by pursuing a law degree from the University of North Carolina, where he met his future wife, Margaret Maggie Branton. They started dating in 1991 and got married 2 years later, on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex and Maggie had 2 sons, Richard Buster Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh. Alex joined his family's law firm, PMPD, as a personal injury attorney, aiming to continue his family's legacy. However, unlike his ancestors, Alex misused the power and influence his family's firm provided, covering up financial crimes, theft, and possibly even murder. For over a decade, Alex's dishonest dealings went unnoticed until his youngest son, Paul, was involved in a fatal boating accident. This incident was the latest in a series of suspicious deaths surrounding the Murdaugh family, leading people to speculate that these accidents were not coincidental and were instead part of a larger cover-up, given the family's history and resources. Here's what happened on February 23, 2019. Paul Murdaugh, fresh out of high school, took his family's boat to Pucas Island for a party with friends. The group, including his girlfriend Morgan Dowie, Anthony Cook, and Miley Almond, wanted an unsupervised night of fun. They planned a house party and oyster roast on the island. To make the night complete, Paul used his older brother's ID to buy beer and hard liquor. They left the Murdaugh River house around 7 p.m. and continued partying until midnight. Feeling restless, Paul suggested driving the boat to downtown Beaufort, where he and his friend Connor had 2 rounds of shots at around 1 a.m. As they headed back to the boat, a surveillance camera caught a tender moment between Anthony and Mallory. Paul, who was heavily intoxicated, started acting strangely on a boat ride with friends. At 1:15 a.m., the group got back on the water, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Paul drove the boat in circles, showing signs of intoxication, and got into an argument with the others. Anthony wanted to get out on a nearby rock, but Paul refused. GPS footage later showed that the boat's speed increased at some point. Although Paul denied deliberately speeding up, he was in control of the wheel. The boat crashed into Oro Creek Bridge at 2:20 a.m., throwing Mallory into the water. The others were severely injured. Connor broke his jaw and Morgan's hand was badly hurt. Connor called 911 and help arrived soon after. When the deputy sheriff arrived, he saw blood in the main compartment and a large split in the hull from the impact. All the teenagers involved were extremely drunk, and everyone except Anthony required hospital treatment. Paul refused treatment despite being extremely agitated and having a blood alcohol level of 0.243, significantly higher than the legal limit. The search for Mallory's body took 8 days, and she was found to have died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head and drowning. Despite multiple eyewitnesses stating that Paul was out of control while driving the boat, he was not arrested or charged. This led to rumors that Alex Murdaugh had used his influence to protect his son from justice. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was served with a wrongful death lawsuit. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, was aware that her son was drunk when they went boating and that Buster had helped them obtain fake IDs to buy alcohol. Paul was finally charged with 3 felonies on April 18, 2019, but he never made it to court because he died before his trial. A series of mysterious deaths have been linked to the Murdaugh family. One incident involved Stephen Smith, a gay teenager, who was found dead on July 8, 2015. His official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and it was initially ruled a hit-and-run incident with no suspect arrested. However, Stephen's mother believed he was the victim of a hate crime. There were rumors that Stephen was in a relationship with Alex Murdaugh's oldest son, Buster, and that Buster might have been involved in Stephen's death. Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's longtime housekeeper, died on February 26, 2018, due to complications from a severe head injury. Alex Murdaugh claimed that his dogs had caused her to trip and fall, but there was no autopsy to confirm this account. The case was reopened on March 22, 2023, and it was revealed that Gloria's death was actually a murder, although no suspects have been named. Alex Murdaugh's family was involved in a wrongful death lawsuit after his housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, died in 2018. The lawsuit resulted in a $4.3 million insurance policy settlement, but the money never reached Satterfield's sons. Instead, Murdaugh allegedly conspired with his friend Corey Fleming, a lawyer and godfather, to one of Murdaugh's sons to steal the payout. The money was diverted to Murdaugh's bank account and the Satterfield family was never notified. Satterfield's sons filed a new civil lawsuit against Murdaugh in September 2021. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Satterfield's death, citing inconsistencies in the coroner's report. The Satterfield family allowed authorities to exhume Satterfield's body for further investigation. Meanwhile, Murdaugh was facing numerous financial and embezzlement charges. He was allegedly involved in a money laundering and painkiller ring with his distant cousin Curtis Smith, which lasted from 2013 to 2021. On September 4, 2021, Murdaugh orchestrated a scheme in which Smith shot him in an attempt to collect a $10 million life insurance policy. However, the bullet only caused superficial injuries, and Murdaugh was able to call 911 himself. 2 days later, Murdaugh confessed to the scheme and was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. He surrendered himself and was taken into custody. 2 days later, he announced his resignation from his family's law firm and entered rehab. However, it was soon revealed that Murdaugh had misappropriated $792,000 from his law firm. His law license was indefinitely suspended in September 2021. Investigators continued to uncover numerous financial crimes, tax evasions, and embezzlements committed by Murdaugh. After leaving rehab, Murdaugh was arrested again and charged with 2 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretenses. He was denied bond and later indicted on 27 counts of financial misconduct, accused of stealing money from clients, lawyers, and the Satterfield family. Alex Murdaugh faced additional charges on December 9, 2021, with 21 new counts added to the existing 27, bringing the total to 48. The charges included forgery, money laundering, computer crimes, breach of trust, and obtaining signature or property by false pretenses. It was estimated that Murdaugh had stolen over $6.2 million from his victims. The state's investigation into his business dealings took months, with new charges emerging almost daily. By June 2022, the charges against him had risen to 81. And by the time he was formally disbarred on July 13, 2022, he faced 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. One of the victims' mothers filed a legal claim against the estates of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh, raising questions about the character of the once prominent attorney. Could he be hiding something even more sinister, such as the murder of his wife and son? What could have been his motive? The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLRD, revisited the double murder case, considering new information gathered during the investigation into Murdaugh's financial crimes. They discovered that Alex and Maggie Murdaugh's marriage was troubled, and Maggie was living apart from her husband at their beach home on Edisto Island. Maggie's sister, Marion Proctor, told law enforcement that Maggie had not planned to see Alex on the night of the murders. Alex had asked Maggie to meet him at the family's hunting lodge, where she and her younger son were later found shot dead near the dog kennels. Alex claimed to have taken a long nap before leaving to visit his ailing mother, who suffered from dementia. He stated that he was away for 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and found his wife and son dead upon his return. However, law enforcement suspected that Alex's timeline was questionable and lacked a clear motive for the murders. The investigation revealed that weeks before the murder, the state grand jury had subpoenaed Alex Murdaugh's finances, which threatened to expose his financial wrongdoings. Additionally, his law firm had discovered his misappropriation of company funds, and he was confronted about it on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities believed that the financial pressure had pushed Alex to hatch a plan to divert attention from his crimes and garner sympathy in the public eye. 13 months after the fatal shooting, Alex Murdaugh was charged with the murders of his wife and son. The prosecutor alleged that Murdaugh had shot and killed his wife and son at close range with a shotgun and an AR-style rifle. The murder weapons were never found. Murdaugh's defense team argued that two shooters were involved due to the different weapons used. Expert witness testimony suggested that the shooter was likely between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches tall, which ruled out Alex Murdaugh as a suspect due to his 6'4" height. However, under cross-examination, the expert admitted that there were other possible explanations for the bullet trajectory beyond the shooter's height. The investigation revealed that Maggie was shot with 300 blackout ammunition from an AR-style rifle, and a box of this ammo was found at the Murdaugh family estate. Prosecutors argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid accountability for his financial crimes. Alex's lawyers countered that this didn't make sense as it would only shift attention to himself and put him in the spotlight of a murder investigation. Alex was a person of interest from the start of the investigation, but his lawyer claimed he had an ironclad alibi for the night of the murders and no motive to kill his family. Prosecutors presented 2 videos taken on the night of the murder, which appeared to show Alex wearing different shirts. The Snapchat video taken from Paul's phone showed Alex wearing a blue shirt, while the body cam footage showed him wearing a different shirt. Investigators couldn't find the blue shirt, and prosecutors suggested Alex tried to influence a key witness's account of what he was wearing. Cell phone data and testimony from Alex's mother's caregiver confirmed that Alex was only at his mother's home for 15 to 20 minutes, contradicting his claim of staying for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. The most crucial piece of evidence was a video found on Paul's phone recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before the murders. The video featured the voices of Paul, Maggie, and Alex, placing Alex at the scene of the crime. This contradicted his previous alibi and confirmed his presence at the dog kennels where the murders occurred. Alex testified that he didn't shoot his wife or son, but admitted to lying about his alibi. Alex Murdaugh changed his story, claiming that his opioid addiction and resulting paranoia led him to lie to law enforcement. However, prosecutors argued that Murdaugh fabricated this excuse after murdering his wife and son. They believed he used his wife's phone to create an alibi by making calls and sending texts, including, "Me, babe," at 9:47 p.m. Phone data showed that Murdaugh's and his wife's phones locked simultaneously, and Alex's phone recorded a sudden increase in steps around the time of the murder. Prosecutors suggested this was evidence of him trying to hide or dispose of evidence. But his lawyers disputed this, pointing out that the step patterns on Alex's phone did not match his wife's. The decisive evidence came from a video recorded at the dog kennels. After deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury found Murdaugh guilty on all counts on March 2, 2023. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. Additionally, he received a 5-year sentence for possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Murdaugh pleaded guilty to 22 financial crimes as part of a deal, but maintains his innocence in the murders. He appealed his conviction on March 9, 2023. In a surprise move, his lawyers filed a motion for a new trial, alleging that Rebecca Hill, a court clerk, had engaged in jury tampering. Hill denies the allegations, which include advising jurors to disregard Murdaugh's testimony and other defense evidence, pressuring them to reach a quick guilty verdict, and misrepresenting critical information to the trial judge. A hearing is scheduled for Murdaugh's lawyers to present evidence and witnesses to support their claim. However, a judge has not yet been assigned to preside over the hearing. With over 100 financial and drug crime charges pending, as well as multiple lawsuits, it is clear that the Alex Murdaugh case is far from over. The Los Angeles police believe that Sherri Rasmussen's murder was the result of a burglary gone wrong, which is why the case remained cold for almost 3 decades. Then, when a detective examined the cold case file one fateful morning in 2009, he discovered his first hint that the murderer had been hiding there in front of them all along. Hello and welcome to Mystery Detective. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more crime cases. Sherri Rasmussen was the love of John Rueten's life. The couple first met in the summer of 1984. Sherri was a tall Scandinavian beauty with light brown hair. She had a broad face with high cheekbones and a wide set of eyes beneath heavy, arching eyebrows. John Rueten was an outspoken and endearing young guy with a thick mop of dark hair that made him look like a male model. Sherri and John were athletic and were runners on fast track. At age 25, John Ruetten was a recent University of California Los Angeles graduate, and Sherri, who was 2 years older, was the nursing director at the Glendale Adventist Medical Center. Sherri was quite slick. She had enrolled in Loma Linda University at the age of 16, and at the time of her murder, she gave critical care nursing lectures all over the world. She was thought to be intelligent and gorgeous. She was also focused and self-assured. She was an embodiment of the kind of person John aspired to be, or to put it another way, the way he viewed himself at his best. Sherri also had a strong attraction to John. Their bond was effortless and quick. When they met, all of their previous relationships and future ambitions seemed to simply dissolve. They connected and soon became a wedded couple. Their wedding took place in November 1985. After a busy post-wedding holiday season that included joyful visits to both sets of parents, they were settling into their married life pretty easily by the following year. On February 24, 1986, John had begun working at an engineering firm. Sherri was still in bed when he left their Van Nuys apartment in California for work that day. The couple had gone to see a movie the previous night. That Monday morning, Sherri was scheduled to give a motivational speech at work, a managerial tactic she did not feel was effective. She then informed John that she was considering just calling in sick, using a back pain she had suffered while doing aerobics the day before as an excuse. John advised her to go to work and get the speech over with. When John left the front door at around 7:20 a.m., Sherri was still contemplating her options under the covers. On other days, Sherri usually left first for work. John dropped off some laundry on his way to work and arrived at his desk just before 8 o'clock. He considered contacting Sherri, but he didn't want to wake her up if she was planning on sleeping in. Midway through the day, he called home and believed she had changed her mind about going to work when there was no response. He soon tried to call her office line. Her secretary informed him that she had not yet seen Sherri. The secretary claimed that on Mondays, when Sherri taught her classes, she occasionally failed to stop by her office at all. John made 3 or 4 more attempts to contact their home, but still there was no response. Although it was strange, but Sherri occasionally forgot to switch on the answering machine. John didn't seem really bothered. After the close of work, he ran a few errands, stopping at a UPS store and at the dry cleaner to pick up the laundry he dropped off that morning. On getting home, he was surprised to see the door of the garage opened. The Balboa townhomes were made out of white, three-story mock Tudor structures with back alley garage access. A little balcony was located just over the garage, in front of two sliding glass doors. His and Sherri's cars would just fit in the garage perfectly. However, the BMW he gifted Sherri on their engagement was not in sight. Glass fragments were scattered across the pavement near the garage entry. John immediately assumed that this was glass from a car window. According to him, Sherri must have accidentally run into something while she pulled out. She had clipped the door and damaged the aerial on her car a few weeks prior. Oh dear, what did she do now? John had wondered. John removed the dry cleaning in a plastic bag from the vehicle and ascended the steps leading from the garage to the living room. He didn't start to get worried until he noticed that the inner door to their living room was slightly ajar. He carefully opened the door to peer inside. The sight he saw was one he wouldn't have ever imagined. His wife, who had been lively and chatty a few hours ago, was lying lifeless on the living room floor. Her face was swollen, bruised, and bloodied as she lay on the dark rug with her back to it. She was wearing her red bathrobe and had no shoes on. John initially believed she could be asleep, but as soon as he saw her face, he knew something was terribly wrong. Those who pass away violently stop moving in mid-stride, frequently with a frozen expression of final shock. Sherri's long, delicate leg was slightly raised and bowed at the knee. Her robe was flung open and her arms were raised and bent as if she was struggling to stand up. When John touched her leg, it felt rigid. Her body was so cold. In order to check for a pulse, he pressed his fingers to her wrist. But there wasn't any. John was struck. He had heard about murders. In Los Angeles, there would be 831 homicides that year. However, learning about them never gave him hope that something similar may happen to him. Sherri was right in front of him, still shockingly and vividly present to him in every manner, yet completely irrevocably gone. Her right eyelid was purple, swollen, and closed, and her face was coated in dried blood. Her mouth was open in a final gasp, and her left eye was open and looked up. For hours she had been dead. A black bullet hole was located in the exact middle of her chest, just below the rim of her exquisite form, fitting pink camisole. A terrified John called 911. In 1986, the crime scene was extensively recorded. There seems to have been a brawl. The top of a tall stereo speaker from the room was laying next to Sherri on the rug, flushed against her head. It no longer had any wires attached to it. A broken vase made of gray ceramic with a substantial base was on the ground. The shelves of the hardwood display cabinets were crooked and a receiver and amplifier protruded forward from the top of the television. A VCR and a CD player were neatly placed at the bottom of the stairs leading from the living room to the second floor, as if they had been assembled for carrying but were then left behind. The top of the CD player had a single bloody smudge on it. On the east wall and the entrance door there were blood streaks. 2 cords that were braided could be seen on the floor right inside the front entrance. One of them appeared to be the speaker's wire. One of the 2 glass sliding doors to the back balcony on the second floor was broken. This was the glass John had noticed on the sidewalk in front of the garage. Other than the items left on the living room floor, there was no indication of forced entry or theft. However, it was later discovered that Sherri and John's marriage certificate had been taken by the murderer. Homicide Detective Lalmayer found a pink and pale green quilted blanket on the living room chair that had a bullet hole in it and powder burns. A gun had been placed against Sherri's chest after the first shot and fired twice point blank, leaving 2 of what turned out to be 3 holes in her chest. The blanket had been used by the murderer to block out sound. One of the 238 caliber bullets that were found in Sherri's body must have gone straight through her. These 3 shots by themselves would have all been instantly lethal. Someone had intended to erase her from the Earth's surface for good. There was a bite mark on her inner left forearm. A cast was obtained for potential teeth comparison, and the bite mark was swabbed for saliva samples. Police investigators working under Lyle Meyer's direction questioned neighbors, family members, and friends over the ensuing weeks, but they were unable to identify any suspects. A week later, Sherri's silver BMW with the keys in the ignition was discovered parked on a street in Van Nuys. It had many fingerprints, a blood stain, and a strand of brown hair. According to research and community interviews, 2 Latin guys had been breaking into houses in the vicinity, and during one of those break-ins, they had abused a woman. Detectives Mayer's viewpoint from the day of the murder would not change. He claimed the homicide resulted from a robbery gone wrong. However, Nels Rasmussen, Sherri's father, was of the opinion that John's ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Lazarus, who was a cop at the time, killed his daughter. In the months after Sherri and John moved in together, Sherri had confided in her father numerous times. She claimed that Stephanie Lazarus and John attended the same college and got intimate once or twice, but never made their relationship official. On John's 25th birthday, Stephanie threw a surprise birthday party for him. Unknowingly to her, John was seeing someone else. John never considered Stephanie as a girlfriend, and so he had to let her know that he was now in a serious relationship with Sherri. Stephanie, however, was obviously obsessed with John and wouldn't accept that. She subsequently showed up around John and Sherri. Stephanie Lazarus was athletic, bold, and had black hair. According to Sherri, she had unexpectedly visited their home a few weeks prior to their wedding. She went over to the apartment and left a set of water skis for John to wax. The skis, according to Sherri's father, were nothing more than a pretext for intrusion. Provocative act. Sherri didn't like that another woman was intruding their home. She and John had a dispute over Stephanie. John, however, informed her that he and Stephanie were no longer together and that their relationship had never grown that serious, explaining that they had been dorm mates long before lovers. Sherri, however, did not want John to wax those skis. Nels claimed that John did not support Sherri and would not defend her against Stephanie. Instead, he advised Sherri to appease her. Sherri informed her father that the lady police officer had returned unannounced to pick up the skis that John had waxed against her protests. That time, when John handed her the skis, she made it clear that the woman was not welcome and requested her to go. Stephanie had not been at all discouraged by this. She had returned, this time wearing a Los Angeles Police Department outfit and carrying a revolver around her waist. She claimed to be taking a break. John wasn't around. Usually it was John who remained at home while Sherri left for work. Sherri immediately questioned if this was a regular occurrence. Fiancé leaves for work. An ex-girlfriend drops by. She didn't want to accept it as true. She wished to believe John. A few weeks remained till the wedding. Sherri did not cry easily, but one evening she broke down when talking to her father on the phone. When she and John traveled to Tucson for her birthday, she and her father spoke about it more. Nels reported that his daughter expressed a want for John to intervene and tell Stephanie to leave them alone, but all John ever did was reassure her that he and Stephanie weren't dating and that the best course of action was to ignore her until she eventually left. Nels recalled the visit Stephanie Lazarus made to Sherri's office at the hospital. Sherri had thoroughly described this meeting to her father. She claimed that Stephanie barged into her Glendale office and did so without waiting for the secretary to open the door. This time, the female police officer wore tight shorts and a tube top and a tie that screamed her athleticism and sexiness. She then made a chilling remark that says, "If I can't have John, nobody else will," before leaving Sherri's office. Nels Rasmussen told Detective Lyle Meyer all of these in an interview a day after Sherri's murder, just shortly after he had asked the detective the simple question, "Have you checked out John's ex-girlfriend, the lady cop?" Detective Meyer, however, discarded Nels and testimonies. He then told Nels that he had watched too many TV cop shows. Also, John had contested Nels. He assured Detective Meyer that his father-in-law's descriptions of the encounters were not accurate if Sherri hadn't informed him of them. Detective Meyer stuck to the robbery theory. Nels was shown sketches of 2 Latin male suspects shortly after the murder, and the burglary scenario was explained. He was unable to identify the sketches, and the overall situation was incomprehensible to him. He had to question the professionalism of these detectives. The residents had evidence of a fight. According to Detective Meyer, the fight might have continued for an hour and a half. Nels questioned how his daughter had managed to hold off two men for so long. Based on the bite mark on the Sherri's forearm, there was speculation that the murderer was a female, given that women tend to bite during a fight. But the idea was rejected. Along with the hole and powder burns on the blanket, Sherri also had a bullet wound in the middle of her chest. Nels was informed by Meyer that his daughter had been assassinated, not only shot and killed. He wondered why a random thief would just come to assassinate a person without taking anything of value in the house. Nels questioned the detectives if they had checked to see if the female police officer was on duty that day. He asked them if they had inspected or photographed her, but the answers were no. Stephanie Lazarus was never contacted by anyone. Sherri Rasmussen's case went cold, and the evidence of her murder was filed away in the commercial storage. Detective Mayers retired in the coming years, and several years were spent by Nels Rasmussen trying to get his daughter's case reopened. In the long run, many investigators declined to do it, and the investigation didn't pick up again until DNA testing was made accessible. In 2001, Sherri Rasmussen's case was reopened for reinvestigation after a committed Los Angeles Police Department homicide team used new technologies to work on old forensic investigations. But detectives were soon left looking for missing evidence on Sherri's case file. Luckily, in 2004, criminalist Jennifer Francis discovered the missing cotton swab containing DNA from the bite mark on Sherri's forearm. The DNA sample was entered into Cody's, and there was no match. However, the saliva and bite mark were determined to belong to a female, disproving the initial theory that a male burglar was responsible. After this discovery, the case was abandoned once more. In 2009, the Los Angeles Police Department renewed the case. After revisiting the documented crime scene, it was determined that the murderer arranged the crime scene to look like a burglary in order to put police off the case. In the notes from the initial investigation, detectives ultimately discovered a single sentence where Stephanie Lazarus's name came up once in the entire case file. Investigators, however, chose to follow the tip. They contacted John Rutan, who is now remarried with kids. He told them that Stephanie Lazarus had indeed been his ex-girlfriend, and her being Sherri's killer was all Nels Rasmussen's theory. He again said he didn't believe she did it. Investigators contacted Nels Rasmussen after 2 decades. Nels was angry at first because the police department wouldn't interview the killer of his child. However, after a positive feedback from the new detectives, he recounted what he had told investigators in the initial phase of the investigation. The detectives were shocked that all his revelations were never documented. When the detectives discovered that Stephanie Lazarus was a police officer, they ran her name through the department directory and came up with their esteemed colleague in the art theft division. She was a reputable figure in the department and had over the years been promoted for her diligence. Regardless, the detectives began to look into their colleague's whereabouts on the day of Sherri's murder. They knew as a cop, she would be very careful if she wanted to commit a murder. They soon discovered that she was off duty the day Sherri was killed. They looked into the murder weapon. The investigators were aware that most police officers possess at least 2 weapons, one for duty and one for backup, both legally acquired and registered. Records revealed that Stephanie Lazarus had bought a backup .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver not long after graduating police academy. Detectives tracked the Smith & Wesson revolver used as a backup by Lazarus. It was discovered that Lazarus had notified the Santa Monica police in March 1986, just a few weeks after the murder, that the gun had been stolen. If investigators had been looking at Stephanie Lazarus back in 1986, they would have had access to all of this information. But they did not bother at all. The pattern in the evidence missing from the case file was now starting to become apparent to the detectives. It unmistakably appeared that someone inside the police department had been attempting to protect her. This was something Sherri's father knew and what made him angry at the Los Angeles Police Department for many years. The team of homicide detectives then decided to conceal the investigation until they find answers to apprehend police officer Stephanie Lazarus. They needed a DNA from her, and so a special operations team secretly followed her and her adopted daughter to Costco. When they stopped for a snack at a table outside the building, the team was able to recover the cup and straw she had been using. 2 days later, the lab determined that the mouth on that straw was the mouth that had bitten Sherri Rasmussen's forearm during a violent battle 23 years earlier. During an interview in March 2009, Stephanie denied ever killing Sherri, but was ultimately arrested. 2 years later, in March 2012, Stephanie Lazarus was found guilty of killing Sherri Rasmussen. She was given a 27-year sentence. She and the Los Angeles Police Department had been sued by the Rasmussens. An appeal has been filed against a preliminary judgment declaring the department exempt from similar cases. The police department was reinvestigated, but it turned up no proof of an internal cover-up. The missing evidence from the case file still remains a mystery till today. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, and later moved to Cedar City, Utah with his family after his father finished dental school. As a child, Michael was very active and enjoyed playing sports like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He also excelled in school and achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska for the summer, where he quickly proved himself as a leader, rising to the position of line manager and overseeing a team of over a dozen men. This experience showcased his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then embarked on a mission trip to South Brazil with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which deepened his faith and commitment to his religious community. When he returned to the United States, he pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle, and they fell in love. They got married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael appeared to be a devoted husband and father, often spending quality time with his family at sports events, school concerts, and working on projects together in the garage. On January 4, 2023, a shocking discovery was made at the Haight residence in Enoch. 8 bodies were found, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned. The events leading up to this gruesome finding began when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work. Their concerned colleagues contacted the police to perform a welfare check at the Haight residence. When officers arrived, they knocked on the door but received no response. As they surveyed the property, it seemed empty. Considering the Haight's had 5 children, the police reached out to the Iron County School District to check if any of the kids were in school that day. However, it was found that none of the children were present. Before entering the home, the police cleared the premises to ensure it was safe to do so. After a thorough search, authorities confirmed that no one required medical attention, and there was no active threat. The Haight's single-story residence with a basement was declared a crime scene, and detectives arrived shortly after. In the main bedroom, detectives found 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach. His head turned to the left, with one arm under his head on a pillow and a blanket covering part of his body. Tasha, Gavin's mother, was also partially covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, detectives found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head resting on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, similar to her daughter and grandson. In Bree's room, the 12-year-old girl was found lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Amon's room, a 7-year-old boy was found lying face down in the corner, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Sienna was discovered in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed, with her head on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, with her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. In the exercise room of the basement, the detectives found Michael Haight lying on top of a sleeping bag. Sadly, all 8 family members were found dead from gunshot wounds. It quickly became clear to the detectives that Michael Haight was the main suspect, and they believed he had killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. When detectives started investigating, a neighbor provided vital information that helped them reconstruct the crime's timeline. The neighbor told police she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom, and as she left her room, heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, realizing it was after the allowed date for fireworks in the neighborhood, she felt annoyed rather than alarmed by the noise. The neighbor reported hearing an initial loud bang, followed by 2 more in quick succession, then a short pause, another bang, and a longer pause before the final bang. Based on this testimony and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, the detective inferred that the loud noises heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events that unfolded that night, leading them to believe that Michael Haight committed the brutal killings during this time frame. During the investigation into the Haight family murders, detectives discovered a 2020 report from an unnamed individual who had notified the Utah Division of Child and Family Services about abuse in the Haight household. According to the report, 14-year-old Macy had confided in this individual about her fear of her father, sparking a further investigation. The authorities then interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she revealed disturbing information. Her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she lived in fear of being killed by him. She reported that the violent attacks began in 2017 and recounted an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. Michael Haight denied hurting his daughter when questioned by detectives, passing off the incidents as misunderstandings and attributing his emotional state to his father's recent death and his brother's divorce. He claimed to have taken out his frustrations on his older daughter. Despite this, Tasha chose not to press charges, and the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office also declined to pursue the case, as it did not meet the legal requirements for prosecution. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which indicated that her relationship with Michael was not life-threatening. As a result, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months. Further investigation revealed a different side of Michael, unknown to the community. According to Tasha's friends, they had to speak quietly or turn on the kitchen water when visiting Tasha, as they suspected Michael was monitoring and eavesdropping on their conversations. Tasha's friends would often help her clean the house when they visited, which prevented Michael from finding fault with her. When texting Tasha, her friends noticed that she would respond with brief, positive messages, likely to maintain a positive image in case Michael read them. This suggested that everything was fine in their marriage. The detectives investigating the case discovered that Michael exhibited highly controlling behavior towards Tasha. For instance, he would take away her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Another red flag was his overreaction when Tasha bought a $30 rug from Walmart to replace a dirty one, which was a legitimate need. Michael's anger was unwarranted, and he claimed the purchase was excessive. Tasha confided in her friends that her 7-year-old son, Amon, was increasingly imitating Michael's bad behavior. When Tasha gave Amon instructions, he would respond, which concerned Tasha as it showed his lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. Tasha's friends reported that in 2022, Tasha attempted to prioritize her own well-being by getting her nails done, a rare treat for her given her many responsibilities. However, her husband Michael refused to let her do so, imposing strict limits on her autonomy and freedom. Moreover, Michael frequently disregarded or ignored Tasha's instructions, and their friend Amon often followed his lead in doing so. Tasha felt more confident in her appearance after indulging herself, and she decided to get her nails done every month. However, Michael was unhappy about this decision and expressed his disapproval, worried about the cost. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 per month, but Michael was unconvinced, arguing that the money could be better spent on their children. Michael's reaction was rooted in his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. Around the same time, Tasha started prioritizing her self-care and began losing weight, which had been a sensitive topic for her since Michael had often called her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael became furious and accused Tasha of cheating on him, trying to explain the sudden change in her appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalated as he tried to manipulate Tasha's weight loss, pleading with her to stop losing weight because he was worried that other men might find her attractive. This demand was driven by his own insecurities and desire for complete control over Tasha's body and behavior. Tasha's friends also told the police about an incident where the kitchen table broke, and Tasha needed to buy a new one. However, Michael refused to give her the money, further demonstrating his controlling behavior. Tasha was fed up with the old table and decided to take initiative by refinishing it to make it look better and more functional. However, Michael was unhappy with her decision because she didn't ask for his permission first. Michael was extremely frugal during the holiday season. Despite earning a good income, he only gave Tasha $100 for each of their 5 children to buy presents, which was not enough in Tasha's opinion. Tasha always made sure her children had a wonderful Christmas, but Michael refused to provide more funds, claiming that he worked hard for his money and saw no reason to give more to his family. He believed that his income was rightfully his alone. Michael's passion for reducing waste and conserving resources led him to implement strict rules on household habits. He forced Tasha to wash and reuse plastic bags, even if they had been used only once or multiple times. This excessive demand for reusing bags added to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling burdened and overwhelmed. Michael's controlling behavior extended to every aspect of Tasha's life, including her daily routines. For instance, he demanded that she use baby wipes for cleaning, claiming it was better for the environment and more cost-effective. However, this requirement caused Tasha discomfort, hygiene issues, and unnecessary stress. If Tasha failed to follow Michael's instructions, she would face severe consequences, which he made clear would lead to serious trouble. This threat instilled fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her no choice but to obey Michael's demands. Natasha confided in her friends that while Michael had been cruel to her throughout their marriage, he had never directed this cruelty towards their children until the late 2010s. However, over time, the abuse towards their daughter Macy escalated, driving her to consider suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for his daughter Macy, demanding she earn perfect grades despite her struggles, which were exacerbated by the emotional burden of his abusive behavior. This pressure was crushing for Macy. Macy's friends shared a disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael returned home to find Macy comforted by her mother. He became enraged and ordered Macy to clean her room. This event left Macy deeply disturbed, remembering the hatred and evil she saw in her father's eyes. The detectives also discovered an incident where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael while playing with a changing table. Michael responded by blaming his wife Tasha for their children's behavior, calling them the worst and most disrespectful in the world. He then humiliated Tasha, calling her fat and ugly in front of their 5 children. This painful incident prompted Tasha to plan her escape and file for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Tasha realized she had to leave her husband Michael after witnessing his abusive behavior and lack of self-control. She knew staying in the marriage would negatively impact her children, and their well-being was more important than her marital commitment. In December 2022, Tasha filed for divorce but asked for the papers to be delivered after Christmas to give her children one last normal holiday before the separation. When Michael received the papers, he tried to act normal, but Tasha saw through it. He told her to leave the children behind, but she refused, taking them to her mother's home in Lynn, Utah. Michael showed up at his mother-in-law's house trying to convince Tasha to go for a ride with him, but she refused, sensing danger. After filing for divorce, Tasha's mother moved in to support her and the children. However, Michael's actions worsened the situation. He refused to leave the family home, instead moving into the basement. Tasha discovered he had secretly transferred $220,000 from their children's savings accounts without her knowledge or consent. She also found that her inherited firearms were missing, leaving her family vulnerable. The couple's children, Macy and Briley, were affected by the constant drama at home. Macy had a secret phone to record her father's outbursts as evidence for the divorce, while Briley found solace at a neighbor's house. Both girls were relieved about their parents' divorce. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney, expressing concerns about her divorce and Michael's volatile behavior. Although she had relocated him to the basement, the attorneys pressed her about feeling safe. Tasha reassured them she never feared for her or her children's well-being. But in hindsight, her optimism was tragically misplaced. A disturbing discovery emerged from the digital evidence found on the family's computers and cell phones. Just days before the tragic shooting, Michael made a series of concerning Google searches on December 30th at 10:41 p.m. These searches focused on firearms and shooting-related topics, revealing his sinister intentions. The search results showed Michael had asked alarming questions such as the loudness of a 9mm gunshot and what a gunshot sounds like. Before taking his own life, Michael wrote a note expressing his desire to end the controlling behavior he felt he was subjected to by his wife. He stated that he couldn't handle the situation for another day and wanted to escape the manipulation. Michael's note conveyed deep frustration and desperation as he repeatedly asked for help but felt ignored. He emphasized his determination not to be a burden to society. The details of this case have left many in shock, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence. Michael's actions were premeditated and calculated as he carefully planned the murders to catch his wife and children off guard. Abraham Lee Shakespeare was born in 1966 in Florida. He had a difficult start to his life, dropping out of school after the 7th grade and unable to read or write. He spent time in juvenile prisons for various burglaries, but soon started working odd laboring jobs to support himself. His mother Elizabeth, whom he was very close to, said he was a hard worker and always made sure he was employed in some way. Abraham had his first child with his on-again off-again partner Antoinette, and his baby boy was named Moses. Abraham adored Moses, and although he and Antoinette would eventually part ways, Abraham made sure he saw Moses as much as he possibly could. In November 2006, Abraham was working as a truck driver's assistant for a food delivery company. On November 15th, during an overnight delivery trip, he and his colleague Michael Ford were making their way to Miami. They made a stop at a local Townstar convenience store in Frostproof. Michael wanted cigarettes and drinks and asked Abraham if he wanted anything. Abraham asked Michael to buy him 2 lottery tickets. He only had $5 on him and bought 2 for $2 each. Little did he know, he had just purchased the Florida Lotto winning ticket worth $30 million and his life had just changed forever. He had gone from scraping by on odd jobs to being a multimillionaire, never having to work a day in his life again. But less than 3 years later, the money would be gone and Abraham Shakespeare would be a missing man. When it comes to accepting lottery winnings, you can either choose to get the money paid to you in annual installments, or you can take a one-time lump sum payment. Abraham Shakespeare chose to take the lump cash sum of $17 million before tax. In January 2007, he purchased a beautiful home in a gated community in Florida for $1.1 million. He also put $1 million into a trust fund for his son. But after this, he wouldn't really make any other large purchases for himself, instead choosing to gift or loan the money to other people. Later, in April 2007, Abraham was approached by his old truck driving colleague, Michael Ford. Michael demanded a share of the money on the basis that he had been the one to purchase the tickets for him. He refused to pay, resulting in Michael suing Abraham. Michael then alleged it was in fact him who had bought the ticket for himself and then kept them in his wallet and Abraham had stolen them. However, the jury did not believe the story, and in October 2007, after just an hour of deliberation, they ruled that Abraham had not stolen the tickets, and Michael Ford received nothing. Abraham had become somewhat of local celebrity off of the back of his lottery win, and it wasn't long before people wanted a piece of his new lifestyle. Abraham was described as someone who thought with his heart rather than his head, and as a result was incredibly generous with his substantial fortune. He paid off people's mortgages, gave people huge loans and gifts, and paid for medical bills and funerals. Abraham was kind and giving, not just with those close to him, but with strangers too. He also returned the favor to people that had helped him when he was struggling for money. But people said he soon grew tired and frustrated with the appeals for money from everyone. Friends and family, hangers-on and total strangers would all call and write to him, constantly asking for all manner of financial help. The mother of Abraham's second son Jeremiah was a lady named Centuria. She said that even prison inmates sent him letters asking for money. Her brother said that he had spent the morning with Abraham and that his phone had rang 8 times during the half an hour. All of these calls were from people asking for something. In November 2009, Cedric Edom, Abraham's cousin, phoned the Polk County Sheriff's Office to report him as missing. Abraham's friends and family said they hadn't heard anything from him since April, 7 months ago. They wondered if he had perhaps taken his winnings and moved somewhere to start a new life. Others believed he had grown tired of people entering his life purely for the purpose of getting money, and he had stepped away from the public eye to protect himself. The spotlight he had suddenly been thrust into had ultimately taken a toll on him, and this theory didn't seem impossible. But Abraham's mother Elizabeth said he would never have left without telling her 7 months was a long time to go with no contact, and the police immediately began an investigation. One of the people that had come into his life after his big win was a woman named Grace Millane, more known to everyone as Dee Dee Moore. A lot of people in Abraham's life had mentioned Dee Dee's name as someone that might be able to offer more information. Dee Dee had previously worked as a nursing assistant before moving into the offices of a healthcare company. As well as this, she had other side businesses she was pursuing. She alleged that she was making around $10,000 a month from selling Nextel prepaid phones, and was also making an extra $30,000 a year by selling Mary Kay products. But Dee Dee was spending the money faster than she was getting it, and she was in debt with credit cards and on car and house leases too. Dee Dee Moore's relationship with Abraham Shakespeare began when she started talking to Abraham's real estate agent Barbara about a new book she was working on. It was a story about rags to riches, and Barbara suggested she meet and talk to Abraham. However, when she met him, Dee Dee said it was clear that he didn't need a book writing on him. He needed someone to help him organize his finances. Although Abraham had been a multimillionaire just several months prior, he actually had little left as most of it had been given away. Dee Dee wanted to act as a financial advisor to Abraham and help him start a business to manage his money. The pair set one up in Abraham's name with Dee Dee in control of the funds. Dee Dee began her new business venture by giving herself a cool $1 million, buying several cars, expensive jewelry, and going on a lavish holiday. She said this money was a gift from Abraham as a thank you for helping him. But over the next few months, Abraham's money began to dwindle even more. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were now being shifted around into various accounts, including Dee Dee's business account for her own company, American Medical Professionals. At the end of February 2009, the balance of Abraham Shakespeare LLC Bank of America account stood at just over $44,000. Dee Dee seemed more than happy to help the authorities and told them, as well as Abraham's friends and family, that Abraham had grown so tired of people asking for money, he just wanted to disappear. And at his request, she helped him do just that. But while Abraham was missing, Dee Dee moved into his house. She said she had purchased the home from him for $655,000, which was all part of an elaborate scheme that she and Abraham had. She also told authorities that he had transferred most of his money and assets over to her before he left town. But no receipts were found to back this up, and police immediately became even more suspicious of her. They asked Dee Dee if she could get in touch with him. She said although she had been messaging him frequently, she couldn't reveal where he was hiding. Police decided to look into Dee Dee Moore's background, along with her computer and both hers and Abraham's bank accounts. This began the start of a lengthy and complex investigation. Dee Dee had a very checkered past, having been convicted of multiple crimes including insurance fraud, falsely reporting a crime, shoplifting, and writing bad checks. She had once taken out a loan to buy a new Lincoln Navigator, a loan which she soon realized she couldn't make the repayments on. When the vehicle became close to being repossessed to get out of making payments, she staged a particularly shocking scene. She hid the car in a garage and reported that she had been kidnapped and sexually assaulted before the perpetrators stole her car. Investigators claimed she had taped her own wrists and threw herself out of a moving vehicle to embellish the story. She even went as far as to take a rape test kit. She eventually pled no contest and received probation. Further down the line, she was accused of stealing tens of thousands of dollars from people with the intention of helping them set businesses up, only to leave with the money and never contact them again. During the months Abraham had been missing, his friends and family had been receiving text messages from him. Although this would normally be a positive sign, it was actually a massive red flag, as Abraham never texted. He was illiterate and texting was just not something he was able to do. Instead, he spent all of his time calling people. Analysis of Abraham's phone records showed he was taking and making calls consistently throughout each day. But on April 6th, all of these calls stopped and they were replaced by the odd text here and there. It was becoming more and more obvious that something had happened to him in early April. In late December 2009, Dee took Abraham's mother Elizabeth out to dinner. Dee had recently bought Elizabeth a prepaid phone, and while at the restaurant, Elizabeth received a phone call from a private number. On the end of the line was someone claiming to be her son. She immediately contacted the police, who took less than 24 hours to work out the phone's number and GPS location. When the police tracked it down, it appeared to be sat stationary in Lakeland Mall. As soon as the officers pulled into the parking lot, they spotted Dee Moore's car. She was pulled up alongside another car and handed something to the man in the driver's seat. As soon as she drove off, officers surrounded the vehicle. They saw that it wasn't Abraham Shakespeare at all. It was a man named Greg Smith. Greg was an old friend of Abraham's. He owned a barber shop and Abraham used to do odd jobs for him. After winning the lottery, Abraham had given Greg a loan of just over $60,000 to help Greg's mother pay for her house when it went into default. Greg was paying this back in monthly installments. When the police asked Greg what was going on, he said Dee had handed him $300 in exchange for phoning Elizabeth, posing as Abraham. But Greg, along with many of the people that Dee had spoken to, believed that Abraham was in hiding and didn't want to be found. He felt he was helping Abraham stay safe and under the radar and wanted to stop Elizabeth from worrying. When police told Greg that they believed Abraham was not safe and well, and they suspected Dee knew more than she was letting on, Greg was shocked. He agreed to help the police and pass information on to them, fit a hidden wire into a Red Bull can and took it along to every encounter he had with Dee. Although Greg's actions were initially suspicious, police knew that he too had been a victim of Dee Moore's manipulation. While under surveillance, Dee asked Greg to deliver a handwritten letter to Elizabeth. This was going to be a fake letter from Abraham and would be another attempt to stop people looking for him. But Abraham couldn't read and couldn't write, and this would have ultimately drawn more attention to Dee if Elizabeth ever got hold of the letter. Fortunately, it was intercepted by the police via Greg before Elizabeth could read it. As well as Greg Smith, Dee had offered Centoria Butler a $200,000 house if she agreed to lie and say that Abraham had visited her one night. She also paid Abraham's cousin $5,000 to deliver a card to his mother, saying that too was from Abraham. Police knew the answer to what had happened to Abraham lay with Dee Moore, and the evidence against her was rapidly starting to mount. Dee was now panicking and decided to show the media a video that she had filmed of Abraham, which allegedly added weight to her story that he had run away and left his old life behind. A lady named Judith was a longtime friend of Abraham and someone that had become a business associate of Dee. She revealed that Abraham had raised concerns with her about his finances and he wanted to look into them at the bank. When she told Dee about these concerns, Dee told her to stop him getting into the bank, as a lot of the money was no longer in the account. This allegedly happened in March of 2009, just 1 month before Abraham disappeared. On the 13th of January 2010, Grady Judd told the public that the police believed Abraham had been the victim of a crime, and just a day before the conference, Grady Judd named Dee Moore as a person of interest. Several days after this announcement, Dee responded, just as they'd hoped. She contacted Greg Smith again and asked him if he knew anyone that would be willing to take the rap and say they killed Abraham Shakespeare. When Greg told the police about this conversation, they instructed him to call her straight back with a fake story about a relative who was about to undertake a 20-year sentence for drug charges, and that he might be someone to talk to. Dee hastily agreed to talk to him, and the meeting was set for January 21, 2010. But of course, there was no relative, and the man Dee was actually meeting was an undercover police officer called Mike. Dee told Mike that she did in fact feel Abraham was dead. But if he was, she had nothing to do with it. Mike said he needed more details if he was going to take the rap for a crime he didn't commit. He wanted to know where Abraham was, what the murder weapon had been, and where this had all happened. Dee said she would see what she could find out and offered him $50,000 to falsely admit to the crime. Dee met with Greg Smith again. She handed him a .38 caliber pistol. It was registered in her name and was the gun that was allegedly used in the murder. She then drove Greg out to a house in Plant City. It was a house that she had purchased with Abraham's money, and Dee's boyfriend, Shar Krasnicki, was living in it. She walked over to a concrete slab outside and indicated this was where Abraham's body had been buried. She had bought a cattle trough with her and said they needed to pour kerosene into it to burn Abraham's remains. She joked that Greg should bring marshmallows along for when he did this. Greg went straight to the police, and less than a day later, a team of officers were at the property, digging it up. After 48 hours of excavation, police finally found the remains of Abraham Shakespeare. He had been buried almost 9 foot deep under a 30-foot by 30-foot concrete slab. It was determined that he had been shot twice in the chest. He was missing his shoes, and any bits of metal from his jacket and jeans had been cut out or removed. Following this discovery, Dee Dee found investigators herself and said she wanted to come in and talk to them. Still denying any wrongdoing, Dee Dee said she was finally ready to tell them exactly what had happened. She claimed that the killer's name was Ronald, and he told her where Abraham was buried. She said that Abraham had been involved in a big drug deal gone wrong, and that she had watched him get shot while drug dealers cleared out a safe of money. She claimed they decided to leave her alive so that she could continue to give them money down the line. But Ronald was a character that she had fabricated while talking to Greg Smith while she was unknowingly under surveillance and being recorded. She had seemingly forgotten her own lies. Investigators didn't believe a word and asked Dee Dee to leave the station. Over the next few hours, the Polk and Hillsborough County authorities worked hard to secure an arrest warrant. Alongside all the witnesses that could attest to being bribed and lied to by Dee Dee, analysis of phone records added further weight to their case. When police had looked into Dee Dee's phone data, it confirmed what they were already suspicious of. Whenever she and Abraham would text each other, both phones would ping off of the same cell phone tower, indicating that she had his phone. On January 28, 2010, James Moore, Dee Dee's ex-husband, was interviewed. He said that Dee Dee had called him in the first 2 weeks of April 2009, asking him if he could dig a hole in her yard. She said she needed the hole to bury trash in. He claimed he dug the hole and left the property, only to return 2 hours later when Dee Dee said she needed him to fill the hole back up. He said it was too dark by this point to see anything that was inside, but he covered it up at her request. From this, the cell phone record analysis, and the fact that no one had seen or heard from him since April, it is believed that Dee Dee Moore killed Abraham Shakespeare on the 6th or 7th of April, 2009. While the police were working hard on the case, Dee Dee was working hard on clearing her name and telling anyone that would listen she had nothing to do with the murder of Abraham Shakespeare. Dee Dee changed her story so many times she couldn't keep up with her own lies and lost track of the countless versions of events she had told. She said everything from he ran away with a fake passport to start a new life and avoid paying child supports to he was dying of AIDS to there was a video of him with an underage girl circulating and he had to lay low to avoid being arrested. Dee Dee even went as far to say that her own 14-year-old son killed Abraham. But police never believed a word of any story she told. And the more Dee Dee talked, the more far-fetched her stories became. These impassioned interviews and pleas of innocence did nothing to help with the now overwhelming amount of evidence against her. On February 19, 2010, Dee Dee Moore was formally charged with murder, and she pled not guilty. 3 years after Abraham had last been seen, Dee Dee appeared in Hillsborough County Court to stand trial. She claimed she wanted to take to the stand and tell her side of the story, but her lawyers felt it was not a wise decision. Her lawyers said that it was entirely her decision to not take the stand. Throughout the trial, Dee was very animated, often sobbing hysterically, laughing or making outbursts at her lawyers. Although court officials turned off the microphones, Judge Emmett Battles frequently had to stop the court proceedings to address Dee Dee directly and tell her to be quiet. On multiple occasions, Dee was caught pulling faces or blurting out statements at the jury, for which she was reprimanded. Witness after witness came forward. Investigating Officer David Clark told the courtroom that Dee Dee Moore had even made sexual advances towards him. It was also revealed that Dee Dee had phoned her ailing father, hoping he would take the rap for her. The prosecution showed a Walmart surveillance video that said further linked Dee Dee to the crime. The footage showed Dee Dee making a $104 cash purchase of gloves, duct tape, plastic sheeting, and other items found close to where Abraham's body was buried. On December 10, 2012, after just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury had reached their verdict. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She also received an additional minimum sentence of 25 years for possessing a firearm. Judge Emmett Battles said, "Cold, calculated, cruel. They all apply." He said she was probably the most manipulative person that this courtroom has seen. Abraham Shakespeare was your prey and your victim. Money was the root of all evil you brought to Abraham. Dee was absolutely furious with her attorneys and said that if they had allowed her to take the stand to explain her side of the story, she would have been a free woman. Again, her defense team argued the decision to refrain from speaking at the trial was all her own. Dee currently resides at Lowell Correctional Institution and continues to file for appeals, change her stories, and maintain her innocence. In 2019, she changed her story once more. In a handwritten letter to the judge begging for a new trial, she apologized to Abraham's mother and the prosecution for not being honest. But she took no responsibility herself, instead blaming someone else. She said it wasn't drug dealers that killed Abraham, but in fact, Greg Smith was the real killer. She claimed Abraham was having an affair with Greg's wife, and this was the motive for the murder. For months, Dee had staged events and tried to convince everyone that Abraham was alive and hiding, but ultimately, she reached a point where she couldn't keep track of her own stories. Detective Greg Thomas of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office said that in the almost 2 decades he's been in law enforcement, he has never met another person like Dee Moore. Since being in prison, she has spoken out in many interviews, all the while protesting her innocence and giving different stories. Abraham Shakespeare's estate won several lawsuits filed against Dee Moore on behalf of Abraham's 2 sons, Moses and Jeremiah. The home Dee claimed she bought from him was returned to his estate, and Abraham's estate also sued the Bank of America for negligently enabling Dee to steal money from Abraham. Abraham's mother Elizabeth said despite everything, she has found it in her heart to forgive Dee for what she did. Abraham Shakespeare was a generous and giving man. He wanted for nothing and gave almost every penny he had away. He helped the community he lived in, those he loved, and those he didn't even know. He met an awful end at the hands of someone he trusted, and someone he believed was helping him. But his kind-hearted and generous spirit will never be forgotten. The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. In Ohio, the Richardson family, consisting of Kim, Scott, and their children Jackson and Skylar, seemed like a typical family. Skylar was a cheerleader who struggled with an eating disorder from a young age. Her mother Kim first noticed this when Skylar was 12 years old and refused to buy gum with more than 5 calories as a flyer on the cheerleading squad. Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight. This obsession with her body image led to a constant fear of gaining weight. During cheerleading season, Skylar started throwing up after meals to control her weight, which only made her issues worse. When the season ended, her struggles intensified. Skylar experienced episodes of binge eating, followed by periods of starvation or extreme dieting. Her parents grew concerned, but Skylar shut down whenever they tried to talk to her about it. They sought professional help from various doctors and therapists, who eventually diagnosed Skylar with body dysmorphia, a condition where she obsessively focused on a perceived flaw in her appearance. In July 2016, Skylar began dating a friend's cousin, but the relationship didn't last long. By January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, and seemed genuinely happy and healthy. Her parents noticed her weight gain and thought her eating disorder was under control. In February, Skylar picked out her prom dress, a tightly fitted gown that required her to be laced into it. During a family vacation in mid-March, she wore a 2-piece bathing suit and looked wonderful. Her mom, Kim, wanted her to start taking birth control pills to protect her health. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to obtain a prescription for birth control. However, during the visit, the doctor informed Skylar that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar requested the doctor not to tell anyone, and her mother remained unaware of the real reason behind her tears. Skylar and her boyfriend Brandon attended the prom on May 5th, despite her advanced pregnancy. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police showed up at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak to the teenager about something she may have witnessed. The police officers assured the parents that Skylar was not in trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what awaited them. The police wanted to question Skylar regarding a call they received from a gynecologist's office. A patient of an OBGYN doctor gave birth to a stillborn baby and buried it in their backyard. The police were informed and took Skylar, the patient, into custody for questioning. Her father was not allowed to be present during the initial interview. The police read Skylar her rights and shared the details of the doctor's report. According to the doctor, Skylar had discovered her pregnancy on April 26th, but later reported that the baby was not alive and had been buried in the backyard. Skylar admitted to the police that she had given birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She explained that she delivered the baby in the bathroom, noticed it was not breathing, and had no heartbeat. Feeling the need to bury the baby, she retreated to the backyard, dug a shallow grave and buried the body. To mark the spot, she placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. The police informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason for her detention. They were shocked to learn that Skylar had been pregnant, as they had no idea. They expressed sadness that Skylar had gone through this ordeal alone and without their support. Skylar revealed that she had named the baby Annabelle and claimed the father was a close friend's cousin, whom she briefly dated. Crime scene investigators searched the Richardson backyard, removing weeds and debris to uncover the baby's remains. Despite the challenges, they found several bones, including pieces of the skull, which they carefully collected and preserved. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skylar and her parents were allowed to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar again, informing her that they had received new information from the coroner's office. They claimed that the baby's bones showed signs of burning, which Skylar vehemently denied. She insisted that she would never harm her child. The police suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby to hide the evidence, but she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, Skylar suddenly changed her story, admitting that she may have used a lighter to try and cremate the baby's remains. She also stated that the baby might have been born alive and made a noise or even cried before dying. Skylar confessed to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a lengthy interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed she had suffocated her baby. After presenting the case to a grand jury, Skylar was indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and endangering children. She spent the weekend in jail until her family secured a $50,000 bond. Skylar became the center of a media frenzy following her child's tragic death. The public judged and scrutinized every move she and her family made, taking a toll on their well-being. They retreated to the safety of their home, but even stepping outside became difficult due to threats and photographers. Despite her defense attorneys believing Skylar gave a false confession, the prosecution pressed forward with their case. Even when the medical examiner retracted her initial report of burning, the prosecution clung to Skylar's admission that she had attempted to cremate the remains. Throughout this period, Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear. The public scrutiny and threats made their lives unbearable, and they struggled to navigate a world under constant scrutiny. Skylar's defense attorneys worked tirelessly to defend her against the charges. Skylar's family raised the $50,000 bail, but as a condition of her release, she was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet. She remained confined to her home, avoiding public appearances. Over 12 months, Skylar's life took a different path. Her university plans were put on hold as she awaited trial for her baby's murder. The charges were serious, and the defense filed a motion to move the trial to a different county, but it was denied. Skylar faced the trial in the original jurisdiction, grappling with the emotional and psychological impact of the allegations and her isolation. Spending time with her dogs provided comfort and companionship as she awaited her trial. Her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and hoping the truth would come to light. Despite the challenges, Skylar remained determined to fight for her freedom. In July 2019, the state offered a plea deal. If Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, they would withdraw the aggravated murder charge. Skylar's parents were conflicted about the decision, but after careful consideration, Skylar turned down the plea deal. This decision terrified her parents, who wondered if she made the right choice. But they knew it was her decision, not theirs. Skylar went on trial on September 3, 2019 for the murder of her newborn baby girl. The prosecution presented as evidence a text message Skylar sent to her mother shortly after giving birth, saying she was happy and excited that her belly had returned to its normal size. They claimed this showed Skylar was relieved to be rid of her baby. The prosecution alleged that Skylar sent more texts to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, conveying her excitement and happiness. They pointed to phrases like, "I'm so excited and I feel so much better this morning," as proof of her guilt. The state believed Skylar was thrilled about the baby's death and attempted to hide her guilt. The prosecution also claimed Skylar had no intention of keeping her baby and presented evidence that she had searched online for ways to get rid of the baby. They alleged that Skylar's mother had threatened that her life would end if she became pregnant, which instilled fear in Skylar. On the third day of the trial, a doctor testified that the baby's death was a violent homicide, but admitted she couldn't determine when the baby's skull fractures occurred. The defense challenged the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been biased. The defense also questioned the doctor's methods, pointing out that she didn't examine the remains under a microscope or consult with an obstetrician. Another doctor, a fetal medicine specialist, testified that it was unlikely the baby was stillborn, citing Skylar's admission that she felt the baby moving inside her. The prosecution's case included shocking evidence, including images of the deceased baby's remains, which visibly affected Skylar during the trial. Skylar's reaction to seeing pictures of her baby's remains was to stare straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. This stoic behavior contrasted with her emotional response the previous day when the judge entered the room. Skylar's defense attorneys argued that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed the prosecution's evidence was incomplete and misleading, and some texts were taken out of context. They emphasized that Skylar's frequent use of certain language did not prove she murdered her daughter. The defense highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, particularly her long battle with an eating disorder. They presented evidence of her regular visits to a psychologist and nutritionist, along with pictures showing her varying weights and appearances. They argued that despite her physical state, Skylar tried to comfort and care for the lifeless body after giving birth. Skylar's attorney explained that she intended to tell her family about the pregnancy, but never had the chance. According to her doctor, she had 8 to 10 weeks before delivery and planned to attend prom and graduate before telling her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. An obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn, and Skylar's description of the baby's appearance suggested it was not a healthy newborn. The doctor pointed out that Skylar only gained 15 pounds during pregnancy, possibly restricting the baby's development due to her eating disorder. The defense aimed to cast doubt on Skylar's statements to the police, suggesting she only told them what they wanted to hear. They argued that other factors may have contributed to the baby's death, and Skylar did not harm the baby. Skylar Richardson's trial lasted for 1 week, after which the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a verdict. She was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment, but convicted of abuse of a corpse, a felony that carries a sentence of up to 1 year in prison. The judge ordered her to be held in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the next day. During the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the harm she had caused. The judge strongly admonished her for her role in the tragic loss of her baby, believing that if she had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive today. The judge sentenced her to 3 years probation for abuse of a corpse, emphasizing that her actions were morally reprehensible and illegal. In November 2020, a judge granted her request to terminate her probation 2 years early, acknowledging her progress and agreeing that she no longer required supervision. Since being acquitted, Skylar has taken advantage of her opportunity to demonstrate her rehabilitation. She has completed 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that represented her. Although she has faced challenges in finding employment due to her probationary status, Skylar remains determined to pursue her career goals, including attending law school and becoming a public defender. Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born in Essex, England in 1996. Born to parents David and Gillian, she was the youngest of 3 siblings and had 2 older brothers, Michael and Declan. She was sociable, lively, family-orientated, and loved all things creative and artistic. Grace attended the University of Lincoln and graduated with a degree in advertising and marketing. She was excited for a new adventure before she started the next phase of her life. She had saved up for a year-long backpacking tour after her graduation. Grace was described as compassionate and caring, and before she left for her trip, she cut her long hair off and donated it to the Little Princess Trust, so it could be turned into wigs for children with cancer. In October 2018, Grace left her family home and set off on her travels. The adventurous and outgoing graduates traveled to Peru before spending 6 weeks in South America. She met up with other travelers along the way and was keen to share her journey with everyone back home. On November 19th, 21-year-old Grace arrived in New Zealand alone, and 11 days later, she reached Auckland. She checked into a hostel called the Base Backpackers on Queen Street, sharing a room with some other travelers. Saturday evening, December 1st, 2018, Grace left the hostel just before 6 p.m. and headed out into the city center. Dressed in a knee-length black dress, white shoes, and carrying a small handbag, she had made plans to meet someone she had matched with on Tinder. Initially, Grace didn't seem too sure on meeting up, but after some more talking, her and her date eventually made a plan to get some drinks. Grace met her date at a place called Sky City, an entertainment complex with bars, restaurants, and a casino. Grace had been sending messages to her friend Amina back home saying, "I click with him so well. He's an oil manager. He lives in a hotel." By all accounts, the evening appeared to be going well. About an hour later, they visited a place called the Blue Stone Room. At one point, Grace got up from the table and the mystery man for some reason picked up her handbag and started searching it. But just after 9:30 p.m., they both left the bar arm in arm and headed down the street. The next day was Sunday, December 2nd, and it was Grace's 22nd birthday. Her family and friends at home were sending messages and reaching out to her over social media, but Grace unusually wasn't responding to anyone and her 2 phones were going straight to voicemail. Her brother Declan said she had been bombarding them with details and pictures of her trip so far, and no response from her on her birthday was immediately alarming. Grace was a home bird, and this was a red flag. Her parents contacted the Auckland police and reported her as missing on December 5th. Police reached out to the hostel Grace was staying at, and they confirmed that she had not checked back in on the night of December 1st. Initially, the police didn't suspect any foul play. The majority of her belongings were still at her hostel. Maybe she had just stayed with some new friends and forgotten to contact people. Fortunately for detectives, it didn't take long to track down where Grace had been on that Saturday evening due to the vast amounts of CCTV from around the city. The mystery man she was spotted with that night was quickly identified. The very night Grace was last seen, she had changed her profile picture on Facebook. A comment was posted underneath the picture saying, "Beautiful, very radiant." The person that commented was also the Tinder date seen drinking with Grace. This man was Jesse Kempson, who was currently residing at the City Life Hotel in Auckland. Jesse had written a post prior to the comment which caught more attention. Extracts of the post stated he was sorry for his mistakes, his arrogance, and his selfishness. But who was Jesse Kempson? 26-year-old Jesse was born in Wellington and had moved several times as a child after his parents split up. He had been partially raised by his grandparents and was virtually estranged from a lot of his family. Jesse was described by everyone who knew him as a pathological liar. He claimed everything from being the cousin of a famous All Blacks rugby player to telling people he was dying of cancer. He lied to employers, landlords, partners, and his family and friends. Time and again, Jesse's fake world caught up with him, and he was frequently evicted from his flats and lost jobs due to his compulsive lying. A former landlord of Jesse said he had claimed to be a professional softball player who had been signed up by New Zealand's national softball team, the Black Sox. He'd lie and say he was waiting on contract money, but after 8 weeks of excuses, the landlord contacted the Black Sox management. And again, Jesse's lies were exposed. He told his landlord at the City Life Hotel that he was a top manager for Woolworths. In reality, his rent was being paid by state benefits. Jesse's last job was in telephone sales. This also ended in a dismissal due to his lies, and this all happened on the very day he met Grace Millane on December 1st. Jesse was the last known person seen with Grace that night, and police knew he was the man they needed to help fill in the gaps. The same day Grace was reported missing on December 5th, Jesse was asked to come into the station to answer some routine questions. He said nothing out of the ordinary had happened that night. The date had ended nicely with a hug, a kiss on the cheek, and a plan for the following day, before the pair eventually parted ways at around 10 p.m. He said he had tried to message her the next day on Tinder, but noticed that Grace had unmatched him, and that was where his encounters with her abruptly ended. But the officers hadn't yet finished looking through the CCTV from the City Life Hotel, and they were about to start gaining more answers to the remaining questions they had. A sinister and disturbing picture was slowly being put together, and almost 6 terabytes of CCTV data were being analyzed. Despite Jesse saying they parted ways on the street, they were both seen arriving at the City Life Hotel arm in arm. They exited the lift together on Jesse's floor, but Grace was never seen leaving the building. The morning after, on what was Grace's birthday, cameras did pick up Jesse leaving the hotel. They followed him over the coming hours, tracking his every move. He left the hotel in the morning and went shopping to buy a suitcase. He then went to buy some cleaning supplies, and just before noon, he headed over in a taxi to a car rental company and rented a red Toyota Corolla. Several hours later, Jesse met with another woman he had engaged with on Tinder. She later reported that he had some disturbing conversations with her, speaking about burying bodies and his friends that were police officers. His date said he made her feel so uneasy. She declined Jesse's offer to get in his car and made her own way home, never talking to him again. After this, Jesse went out into the city center again, this time to hire a rug doctor carpet cleaning machine, explaining to staff that he had some red wine stains that needed cleaning up. Later on, at 9:30 in the evening, Jesse loaded 2 suitcases onto a hotel trolley and offloaded these into the Toyota he had rented earlier. But around 7 a.m. the next day, he was picked up on camera again, this time buying a shovel. And 2 hours later, he was spotted power washing the car. He then returned the car to the rental company, and it was subsequently rented out by someone else. On the 5th of December, the day Grace was reported missing, Jesse was seen visiting various locations and dumping things in bins. Police arrived at the City Life Hotel looking to talk to him. Just as they reached the front desk, Jesse returned to the hotel himself. The minute he saw the police, he quickly turned around and began walking away, with his head firmly facing the opposite direction. The police clocked him, chased after him, and brought him in for questioning. Despite Jesse denying anything had happened, police still began a thorough search of his hotel room. On December 7th, David, Grace's father, was now in Auckland. He made an emotional plea for help. The investigation was moving quickly, and although police didn't name him, they revealed they had spoken to Jesse and that he was a person of interest. The more time ticked by, the more fearful people became, and the police stated that they had grave concerns for Grace. On December 8th, as more and more evidence was coming to light, Jesse was eventually taken into custody and interviewed again. His story had now drastically changed. Jesse said that when he had awoken the next morning and realized Grace was dead, he went into shock. He panicked and put her body in a suitcase and drove out to bury her. He still denied any guilt, however. The forensic search of Jesse's room added more to the already disturbing story. Despite Jesse's attempts to clean up, Grace's blood covered the floor of the hotel room. Given what Jesse had told them, it didn't take long for police to start searching an area on Scenic Drive near the Waitakere Reservoir. Shortly after 4 p.m. that day, officers found a body around 10 yards from the road. D.I. Scott Beard had been heading the investigation and was working closely with the Millane family. For him and his team that had been hoping to find Grace safe and well, and bring good news to the family, it was clear how much of a painful moment this was for everyone involved in the search. The grief was shared throughout the nation. Thousands of people paid tribute to Grace and held vigils. The New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern publicly apologized to Grace's parents and offered hers and her country's full support. Following this, Jessie Kempson was formally charged with the murder of Grace Millane. On December 10th, just 5 days after Grace was reported missing, Jessie appeared in court in Auckland. He was granted an interim name suppression to ensure a fair trial, which is why so much of his interview footage was blurred out for a long time. Following an autopsy, a pathologist confirmed that Grace had been strangled and had bruises on her arms and chest, consistent with being pinned down. Considerable force would have been required, and the pressure on her neck must have lasted between 4 and 5 minutes to be enough to kill her. At around 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, as Grace lay dead in his room, Jessie carried out a number of internet searches. Using his phone, he looked up hottest fire, flesh-eating birds, and Waitakere Rangers, the location where he would later try to bury Grace's body. After this, he trawled through a pornography site. He then took several intimate photos of Grace's dead body. Just over a month after Grace was found, hundreds of people turned out for her funeral at Brentwood Cathedral in Essex. Detective Inspector Scott Beard, who had been looking after the case, flew to England to pay his respects and support the Millane family. 6 days after Grace was laid to rest, appeared in the High Court and he pled not guilty. His trial began in November later that year. The trial would last just 3 weeks, and for much of it, Jessie remained stony-faced, showing no emotion. He occasionally glanced down at court papers or held his head in his hands. Jessie's defense team argued that although tragic, Grace's death was caused by nothing more than consensual rough sex that had gone horribly wrong. They claimed that Grace had engaged in sexual encounters like this before meeting Jessie, and this time it had been a tragic case of sexual misadventure. They said that Jessie had simply panicked and attempted to hide Grace's body after he realized the sexual encounter had accidentally taken her life. But the prosecution were already armed with a mountain of strong evidence and witnesses. They argued that Jessie did not panic, and this was not simply something that went wrong. It was very clearly deliberate and intentional. They said that he had calmly and callously set about covering his tracks, creating what they called a labyrinth of storytelling and lies as he went. Despite his protests of innocence, on the 22nd of December 2019, after just 5 hours of deliberations, Jessie Kempson was found guilty of the murder of Grace Millane. Jessie was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. The case prompted many people to express their anger at how Grace's life had been presented during the trial and how her death had been explained away by her killer. Many feeling it was shameful and grotesque victim blaming rather than placing the blame on the murderer himself. Jessie's family branded him a pathetic fantasist. His stepbrother said he lied over pointless things all the time and continued to lie until the point where he's got no out, and then he breaks down, cries, and runs away. After he was found guilty of murdering Grace in the highly publicized trial, Jessie faced a further 2 trials the following year. These were judge-alone trials and no jury was present. 2 women had gone to the police when they had seen the blurred images of Jessie after he was arrested for Grace's murder. They knew instantly it was him, and they both had horrific stories to tell the officers about Jessie. In the first of these 2 trials in October 2020, an ex-partner spoke of the physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse she had suffered while with him. Jessie would hold knives to her throat, choke her, force her to perform sex acts, and drain her account of $10,000. Jessie was found guilty of 8 charges and jailed for 7.5 years. In November 2020, he was put on trial again, this time for raping a young British tourist he had met on Tinder 8 months before he had murdered Grace Millane. He forced himself on her and said, "If you don't do this, I will kill you and I will kill your family, and you know I will." He was then found guilty and given another 3.5 years in jail for this crime. This brought the total to an additional 11 years, which will run concurrently alongside the sentence he received for the murder of Grace. When Justice Jeffrey Venning found him guilty of rape, it prompted an aggressive outburst from Jessie. Tragically, in November 2020, Grace's dad, David Millane, passed away after a battle with cancer. In December 2020, the name suppression concealing Jesse's identity finally lapsed when the Supreme Court denied his last-ditch appeal against his sentence in Grace's murder. It is alleged that Jesse is working on appeals in both of the sentences for the 2020 trials as well. To honor Grace's memory, her family and friends raised a record amount of money for the White Ribbon Campaign. The White Ribbon Campaign is a charity looking to end male violence against women by engaging with men and boys to make a stand against violence and challenge behaviors. Grace's family and friends raised over £11,000 in her name. The Love Grace campaign was also set up in Grace's honor. The campaign asks for donations of handbags filled with essential items to help provide support for women seeking refuge from harmful and abusive relationships. Case of Sherri Joughin. Sherri Joughin was a bright and cheerful young woman who spread joy and laughter wherever she went. Her adventurous nature and ability to find humor in any situation made her a delight to be around, even when she made mistakes. As she entered high school, Sherri's confidence and enthusiasm only grew. She fearlessly tried out new experiences, including volleyball, and showed remarkable poise both on and off the court. After returning from a family vacation on July 19, 2016, Sherri was excited to start the new semester at the University of Toledo, where she had plans to study abroad. She had recently bought a new bike and was eager to take it for a spin. Her mom wanted to discuss her study abroad plans with her, but Sherri decided to visit her boyfriend Josh's house, which was 7.12 miles away beforehand. Sherri left her house in high spirits, wearing shorts and a tank top, and promised her mom she would be back by 10:05 p.m. However, when Josh tried to reach her later, her phone went straight to voicemail. Alarmed, Josh called Sherri's mom, who immediately sensed that something was wrong. Sherri's family, including her aunt and Josh, mounted a search effort to locate her after she went missing. They thoroughly searched the neighborhood, suspecting she might have been involved in an accident. Despite their efforts, they didn't find any clues or signs of Sherri's whereabouts. As time passed, Sherri's family became increasingly worried. Her mom eventually contacted the police, who arrived about an hour later. A concerned neighbor informed the family that County Road 6 was blocked off, and they rushed to the scene. There, they found a chaotic atmosphere and officers who wouldn't allow them to pass. The officers weren't able to provide any information, leaving Sherri's family in a state of panic. In desperation, they decided to seek help from the FBI. As the night wore on, Sherri's family was left to wonder what had happened to their daughter, unable to rest due to their growing concern. The next day, Sherri's mom and aunt started searching for her by calling hospitals, looking for any unidentified females. Although they didn't find anything, they got a promising lead from Detroit, Michigan. A young woman who looked a lot like Sherri was in the hospital after escaping from a moving vehicle with serious injuries. To confirm her identity, a nurse asked Sherri's family to describe any distinctive marks on her body. Sherri's mom mentioned a scar on her calf and her pierced belly button. The woman in the hospital seemed to match Sherri's description, giving the family hope that they had finally found her. However, their hopes were soon dashed when they discovered that the woman in the hospital was not Sherri after all. The family was devastated to learn that the person found wasn't Sherri, as they had pinned their hopes on it being her. Later that morning, police officers came to Sherri's house to update them on the previous night's events. One of the officers had discovered a disturbed cornfield near the area while parking his car. He noticed signs of a struggle inside the cornfield and found a motorcycle track. To avoid contaminating potential evidence, he retreated without touching anything. As he retreated, he caught a glimpse of something shiny that turned out to be Sherri's purple bike. Further investigation revealed several items at the scene, including male and female sunglasses, a bloody sock, and a screwdriver. Based on these findings, the police believed that Sherri had likely been abducted from that location. Detectives investigating Sherri's disappearance interviewed her friends and family to learn more about her boyfriend, Josh. They found out that Sherri and Josh had been close friends since childhood, starting from when they were just 7 years old. As they grew older, their friendship turned into a romantic relationship in their first year of high school, and they became known for being a happy and adventurous couple. Skiing was one of their shared hobbies, and they would often go skiing together. After high school, Sierra went to the University of Toledo, while Josh attended Bowling Green. Despite the physical distance between them, they remained committed to each other and would often talk about getting married someday. However, Sierra wanted to focus on her education before settling down, showing how dedicated she was to her studies. Despite the challenges of being apart, their relationship remained strong and serious. On July 19th, detectives learned that Sierra had visited Josh's house in the early afternoon. She left his house around 6:30 p.m. to return home, and Josh, concerned for her safety, accompanied her on his motorcycle for part of the way. However, after a few miles, Sierra insisted that Josh turn around and let her ride her bike the rest of the way home alone. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways. Josh headed back on his motorcycle while Sierra continued riding her bike. During the investigation into Sierra's disappearance, detectives found motorcycle tracks in the cornstalks near Sierra's bike. This discovery raised a key question. Did these tracks come from Josh's motorcycle? The detectives couldn't ignore this potential connection and began investigating further to see if they could link Josh to the scene of Sierra's disappearance. They set up a command post to gather and analyze any relevant clues. A promising lead emerged quickly. A local resident came forward, saying he had found a motorcycle helmet on the side of the road on July 14th while driving. He picked it up and stored it in his truck. After learning about Sierra's disappearance, he examined the helmet more closely and discovered red stains that appeared to be blood. The helmet was found in the same general area where Sierra's bike was discovered in the cornfield. The detectives asked Josh about his motorcycle helmet, and to their relief, he produced it, confirming he had it with him. They also verified his alibi by speaking with his parents, like ruling him out as a suspect. Although visibly shaken, Sierra's family never considered Josh responsible for her disappearance. The detectives were determined to identify the owner of the blood-stained helmet, recognizing the significance of DNA evidence. They sent the helmet to the crime lab for testing, anticipating a potential breakthrough. The detectives waited patiently for the results, hoping it would lead them closer to solving the case. The news of Sierra's disappearance spread quickly throughout the town, prompting the community to come together to search for her. Citizens joined forces, organizing search parties that scoured every possible area, searching for any clue that could lead to her whereabouts. As the townspeople worked tirelessly to bring Sierra home safely, they felt a strong sense of unity. To show their support, the community organized a candlelight vigil at the local high school. The atmosphere was emotional, filled with grief, hope, and determination. Hundreds of people gathered, holding candles and sending their thoughts and prayers for Sierra's safe return. After 2 days of investigation, the police received a tip about a suspicious van seen speeding through the area. They suspected that Sierra might have been taken in the van, possibly falling victim to sex trafficking. The police received a tip about a license plate number linked to a van that was speeding through the area where Sierra went missing. They interviewed the van's owner, who explained that he had sped up because another vehicle had suddenly approached from behind, possibly a family member searching for Sierra. This had startled him, causing him to quickly leave the area, which may have given the impression that he was involved in Sierra's disappearance. After 48 hours of investigation, the police had no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. As each day passed, her family's hopes of finding her alive were dwindling. The police continued their door-to-door search, which eventually led them to a nearby farm that belonged to James Worley. The farm had several structures, including a house, a trailer, and a large barn. The police questioned James Worley about the day Sierra disappeared, hoping to get any information that could help them find her. To the detective's surprise, James revealed that he had been riding his motorcycle on the day Sierra went missing. However, he claimed that his bike had broken down, causing him to lose some items, including a screwdriver and his helmet. The detectives were stunned, as these were the same items found at the scene of Sierra's abduction. This revelation raised significant suspicions about James. The detectives were determined to investigate further and question James about Sierra's disappearance. They noticed scratches on his face, indicating that he had been involved in a struggle. This discovery only increased their suspicions and raised more questions. They wondered if the scratches were the result of a confrontation with Sierra. The detectives decided to investigate James' background, hoping to uncover relevant information. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. James had a dark criminal history, including a previous attempt to abduct a 26-year-old woman named Robin Garda on July 4, 1989. On that day, Robin was getting ready for a neighborhood picnic when she decided to go for a bike ride. As she rode, she became thirsty and contemplated returning home. However, before she could make that decision, a car approached from behind and collided with her bike. The impact sent Robin flying into a nearby ditch. The driver, who later turned out to be James, approached Robin and asked if she was okay. However, he soon revealed sinister intentions, striking her in the back of the head and threatening her life with a screwdriver. He forced her into his car, attempting to handcuff her. Robin resisted fiercely, preventing him from securing the second cuff. Despite being on the verge of losing consciousness, Robin continued to fight. She screamed for help, but her cries were drowned out by the desolate cornfields. Just as she was about to give up, she heard a motorcycle approaching. The rider noticed her distress and stopped to help. Robin escaped by climbing onto the back of the motorcycle, leaving her captor behind. The motorcyclist drove Robin home, where she collapsed. Her mother called the police and an ambulance, and Robin was rushed to the hospital. The motorcyclist then led the police back to the scene, where they found James still present with his car. James cooperated fully, providing identification, but his account of the events differed significantly from the truth. He denied any intention of abducting Robin, but the detectives were not convinced. James Worley claimed that he had to restrain Robin with handcuffs after a bike accident to prevent her from harming herself, not to harm her. He said he was concerned about her well-being and wanted to get her help. However, James had a dark past. In 1989, he was arrested for trying to kidnap Robin and was found guilty, receiving a 6 to 10-year sentence. Due to good behavior, he was released after 3 years. When Robin learned of his release, she was terrified, fearing he might harm her again. The police had reason to suspect James and Sierra's disappearance. Given his criminal history, they obtained a search warrant for his residence, which he shared with his mother. Initially, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but upon inspecting his expansive backyard, they found a suspicious barn. Inside the barn, they discovered a small green crate containing labeled and sealed bags of women's clothing, including a pair of bloody purple panties. The detectives also found a hidden freezer, air mattress with stains, zip ties, duct tape, and handcuffs. James claimed the items were for a porn business, but the evidence suggested otherwise. The police collected all the items for DNA testing, and the evidence led to James' arrest for Sierra's murder. The investigation continued with the police searching every inch of James' property, including a pond, which they drained to search for evidence. The question on everyone's mind was, where was Sierra's body? The detectives expanded their investigation to the attic's front insulation and neighboring properties. Recognizing that evidence might have been dispersed beyond James' property, they thoroughly explored all leads. A farmer reported a suspicious area in his field where the corn seemed matted down with a nearby mound of dirt that resembled a potential grave. The farmer's concerns were heightened due to the ongoing search for Sierra, so he quickly contacted the police. The police responded promptly, noticing a fresh pile of dirt that fueled their suspicions. They carefully processed the area, avoiding potential evidence disturbance. Despite their thorough search, no clues were found regarding Sierra's whereabouts. The detectives then searched adjacent farms using drones and helicopters to cover more ground. They soon discovered a mound of dirt with freshly matted corn, with trained dogs indicating a potential crime scene. As they dug, they made a grim discovery. Human remains, later confirmed to be Sierra's body. Tragically, her hands were bound behind her back, and her feet were tied to handcuffs. An object was lodged in her mouth, restricting her airway, which ultimately led to her death. The devastating news was delivered to the Sierra family that night. The family was overwhelmed with grief, and their sorrow was palpable. 1 month after the abduction and murder, James Worley was indicted on 19 counts, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, Worley stood trial, pleading not guilty despite overwhelming evidence. The state presented a terrifying story over 8 intense days, and the jury deliberated for 6 hours before finding Worley guilty on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The sentence imposed was death. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.